Disclaimer: no alcoholic beverages were consumed in the production of this video. We do not condone the acts of underage drinking. Thank you.
Boy, it's a hot day out. I sure could use a drink.
Hey.
Looks like you could use a drink. How about you have a beat?
Oh yes, mister. I got $1 right here. Is that enough?
That'll do. Just give it to me. Here you are, sir.
Oh, thanks, mister. I sure am parched. I can't wait to drink this.
Freeze! Alcohol's illegal, punk!
Whoa! I didn't realize alcohol was illegal!
Well, yes, alcohol isn't illegal anymore, but it was illegal back in the roaring 20s. Segway!
Alcohol was very popular during the late 1800s and early 1900s. It's even said that presidents such as George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin were heavy wine and beer drinkers. It's safe to say that alcohol flowed through the U.S. like water. Various saloons had connections with a brewery which would supply them with the alcohol. These establishments were called tide houses. By 1830, the average American over the age of 15 drank the equivalent of 88 bottles of whiskey every year. Alcohol consumption and production was not regulated very well, and this created the problem of public drunkenness. Some women, realizing that alcohol was a detriment to society, decided to form the WCTU, or the Women's Christian Temperance Union, in which their goal was to abolish the production of alcohol. Their methods include singing hymns in front and inside of saloons. Some women, like Carrie Nation of Kansas, went into saloons and physically destroyed them, particularly with a sledgehammer and a billiard ball. One particular organization that led to the passing of the 18th Amendment was the Anti-Saloon League. They were founded in 1893 under the leadership of Wayne Wheeler. They hired lawyers and even had organizers raise funds for support. In December of 1917, the 18th Amendment has passed through both chambers of Congress. It was ratified on January 16th of 1919, and the final person to enforce legislation on the amendment was Andrew Volstead, who passed the amendment after President Woodrow Wilson tried to veto it. The 18th Amendment prevented the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages in the U.S. Prohibition would take effect at midnight on January 17th, 1920.
Prohibition was rather hard to enforce by the government. The duty of enforcing it switched between many different bureaus of government. Prohibition's enforcement had much more success in small towns compared to urban cities. Anyone who really wanted to drink would find ways to. This era really showed that where there's a will, there's a way. The effect that this had on the country was it led to the rise of organized crime. Bootlegging, which was the illegal manufacturing and sale of alcohol, became commonplace in society. This took place in private deals, as well as the speakeasies, which were nightclubs and bars that sold alcohol illegally. There was also a general rise of criminal activity associated with bootlegging. These were activities such as the smuggling of alcohol over state borders, as well as the illegal manufacturing of it in private homes. One of the most notorious gangsters associated with this was Al Capone. He ran many illegal bootlegging operations in both the city and suburbs of Chicago. He was said to have amassed $60 million every year from these operations.
I came to Chicago with $40 in my pocket. My son is now 12. I'm still married and I love my wife dearly. We had to make a living. I was younger than I am now and thought I needed more. I didn't believe in prohibiting people from getting the things they wanted. I thought prohibition was an unjust law, and I still do.
Bootlegging was a serious operation that required a lot to yield success. Many gangsters were able to get this success with the power of their intimidation. They would also constantly pay off cops and lawyers to keep these businesses up and running. Eventually they became more involved in the business and they began to hire accountants and lawyers to aid in money laundering tactics. What had once become local menacing and crime became multi-million-dollar sophisticated operations of alcohol smuggling. These operations eventually turned deadly in rival shootouts, the most prominent of these being the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Chicago in 1929. This came about when Al Capone had first taken over for his predecessor, Johnny Torrio, who had kept the peace with rival gangs. This, however, didn't work for Capone, and what ensued was a very deadly incident. Capone's men, dressed up as police officers and armed with Tommy guns, showed up to the garage of a rival gang and shot and killed 7 of them.
Soon after the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, Capone and his bodyguard would be arrested in Philadelphia on May 17, 1929, for concealment of deadly weapons. Capone and his bodyguard were sentenced to terms of 1 year each. Capone served his time and was released for good behavior on March 17, 1930. 1 year later, Capone was arrested again on February 28, 1931, due to Capone being found guilty on a contempt of court charge that he was arrested for 2 years prior. He was sentenced to 6 months in the Cook County Jail. On June 16, 1931, Capone pled guilty to tax evasion and prohibition charges. He was boasting to the press that he got a 2.5-year sentence due to cutting a deal with a judge, but then he was informed that there was no deal. Capone then changed his plea to not guilty. Just when Capone's sentence couldn't get any longer, he was convicted on October 18, 1931, and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. He was fined $50,000 and $250,000 plus interest on back taxes. He tried to appeal, but he was denied of his appeals and was transferred from the Cook County Jail to a U.S. penitentiary in Atlanta, and eventually was transferred to Alcatraz. Capone died shortly after his release from Alcatraz. Prohibition ended with the election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This was due to America entering the Great Depression, and Prohibition was ultimately bad for the economy. In December of 1933, the 21st Amendment was passed and repealed the 18th Amendment. An hour later, FDR announced the end of Prohibition and said, "I trust in the good sense of the American people, that they will not bring upon themselves the curse of excessive use of intoxicating liquors, to the detriment of health, morals, and social integrity."
So yes, alcohol was legal, but it's not illegal anymore, so drink up!
Thanks, sir. I'm glad alcohol's legal again. I sure am thirsty.